Okay, I think we are live. I think we got past the computer problems. Let me start recording here. All right, don't you love it when you have computer problems? Okay, fantastic. Let me just do a little bit of maneuvering here. In the meantime, let's do this. How about this? Thank you, Zoom, for letting me know that. Let me let you at least look at this and let you know where you are at. So, welcome. This is Noe with Walk with Yah. Um, and we are on the From the First to the Third Heavens Bible study. So welcome. Glad you're here. Sorry just having a little bit of technical difficulties this morning. For whatever reason, YouTube was like, you can't log in. Okay, let's try a different way. And it worked. Okay, so I just want to get myself up here, not because it's all about me, but because I need to see if anyone's chatting. And make sure I'm muted. And I'm muted. Yay. I think we got a live show going. So let me stop that. So here we are. Yep, I think I see you. Anyways, um, happy New Year. So glad you made it. I pray everything went well with you. There we go. I think I have everything in place now. All right, I feel much better. Um, a lot of screens going on. Okay, I think I got it. Okay, as I was saying, happy Gregorian New Year. Now, why did I say Gregorian? Um, if you're familiar with Walk with Yah, or if you're familiar with the biblical calendar, the actual New Year that I like to celebrate, that I prefer, is what's known as Yom Teruah, Rosh Hashanah. Goes by many other different names also as well. Um, and that was this year was back in September, starting at the night of September 2nd. So to me, that New Year is more important because that is Yah's calendar, God's calendar, the biblical calendar, not the Jewish calendar, but the biblical calendar. Um, and yes, I'll still celebrate the Gregorian New Year, family and that type of stuff. But it's not really as big of a deal to me. The eternal clock, if you will, goes by the biblical calendar. So, anyways, still hope you had a good time and spend it with your loved ones and or family. And so, but welcome. You are here and we are on this Zoom broadcast, which is also going out to YouTube, as you heard me say just a few moments ago. And I just want to remind you that um, there is availability via Zoom if you want to connect that way. And so I should have that information posted on the Walk with God calendar from previous, from the first to the third heavens uh, videos that have been posted, etc. Um, because in that way we can have some, you know, real-time engagement. I mean, you can with via chat, but one of the things that Zoom brings is, hey, you know what? Maybe if you would like to see if I could prophesy over you, see if that works. To see uh, if you would like just a few minutes of deliverance. If you've watched the Walk with Yah videos, if you're familiar with how I work, if you're not so familiar, it may not go as smoothly. If you don't know how deliverance flows, um, if you've never done it, well, then You may not want to, but who knows? You might. I can never promise results. I'll put it that way. So, anyways, this is going to be an exciting year. Uh, I don't actually know what I mean by that, but again, I think we're getting closer to the tribulation, and I think as that one line from the A Tale of Two Cities. I don't know the rest of the book. I only know the first line, which is, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. So for those that know their creator, uh, that know Yeshua, that know Jesus, it can be the best of times. And for those that don't know him so well, it's going to be much tougher. So, anyways, but let's get started. Um, Let me go back to the share. And okay, here we go. Let us get started. Okay, so on this January the 4th, so what we're going to cover is Vayigash, means and he drew near, uh, mainly going from Genesis 44 to 47, and then Vayakai, which means and he lived, going up to Genesis 50 with some, you know, a lot of commentary all throughout, going all throughout. All right, so in Torah, in the Torah, in Genesis 44, what's going on? So we got Joseph, he tests his brothers. So we kind of, from the last sections, the last chapters prior to, we know that there was a famine in the land, and that Jacob and all of the rest of Joseph's brothers who threw him in the pit, who were jealous of him, kind of, Joseph kind of taunted them. He gave them some reason. He was still young, and then he got sold. His brother sold him to some Ishmaelites, with Reuben and Judah, trying to play nice there, but ultimately got uh, sold to the Ishmaelites, taken to Egypt. Um, Joseph, again, the prior chapters, he's in prison, has these dreams that he interprets, eventually gets brought to Pharaoh, who has dreams that no one can interpret, and that causes Joseph uh, to be become very well known as the second most powerful in Egypt. And I believe that there's in this world today that the non-believers need to see the wisdom, the spiritual wisdom, uh, the spiritual power, if you will, that Yah's people have in them, if we will allow that. And so, anyways, so there's a famine in the land, um, and Joseph, uh, his his brothers, Joseph's brothers, go to um, Egypt because that's where Joseph's at. He's kept all the grain, preparing for this time of famine, and his brothers don't know that Joseph is the number two guy in charge. I'm sure he's pretty much looking like an Egyptian at this, walking like an Egyptian at this point in time. So in Genesis 44, he's talking with his brothers. His brothers don't know that it's Joseph that they're talking to. And he's asking them about their family, because obviously that's a big concern for Joseph. And so Judah at this point in time, in Genesis 44, verse 32, um, we actually see him stand up. He's like, hey, like, I pledged to my father Jacob, um, that I I will bear the blame here. If anything goes wrong, like, it is on me, because he doesn't want anything happen to Jacob at this point in time, because Jacob's older. He's already still grieving over his lost son, and Judah steps up. And so this, to me, brought a question, um, because I'm thinking of other verses as well. The questions that I brought up are, who is your family? Are there different types of families? Who else has had to play this role in the Bible? And so we'll get to that in a second, but I have some verses here. Um, in Matthew 12, verse 46, Yeshua, Jesus, speaking to the people, and his earthly mother and brothers stood outside, and they wanted to speak to him. And what does Yeshua, what does he say? Who is my mother and who are my brothers? You know, and he stretched out his hand towards his disciples and said, hey, these disciples, his spiritual family, here are my brother, my mother, and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. So we actually have a spiritual family, and it's what just came to mind to me. You can do with this as you wish, but there's another verse in Luke that we know that the Roman Catholics, they give a lot of precedence to Mother Mary. Um, some of them may say that they worship Mother Mary. I think in some cases they very well may. Um, they give her a little more attention than I like, than I prefer for myself. Um, and they will tell you that they don't worship her. I don't know. That's a case by case basis. But there's a verse in Luke, I think it's 7, I think, where the people there are saying, hey, you know, how blessed is, the mother of you, Yeshua, whose breast you have suckled. And Yeshua goes, yeah, well, how much greater is it for those that, worship, the creator? Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. And then here we also see again that his mother is not, Yeshua's mother is not being raised up. She's just being part of the family. Now, don't get me wrong. Do I believe, you know, I believe there's proper respect that should be given to the mother of Yeshua. She's not the mother of God, as they like to put it. Um, she's the mother of the physical Jesus. That's what she's the mother of. But she's not the mother of God. And so, yeah, a little play on words there. Anyways, so, but again, he's saying that there's a spiritual family. Yes, you have a physical family. Yes, you have a spiritual family. Um, and he says, even in Romans 2:29, but a Jew is one inwardly, and circumcision is a matter of the heart by the Spirit, not by the letter, meaning, roughly not by the Torah. And in other places, I think in Romans also as well, perhaps Galatians, where where the Bible says that um, even that those that are from Abraham, they don't do as Abraham did because he had faith. Even Yeshua said, "Hey, you're a son of the devil." So you think that you Pharisees, um, with all your religious stuff, are, you know the Father, and he's like, no, you're not from that Father. And so, do the laws in Torah have a place? Oh, yes. Um, and even many places in the Bible, it says that, uh, you know, in John and other places, First John, that Yeshua says, hey, if you love me, you'll obey my commands. And so, and a lot of people, they're like, hey, I love Yeshua, Jesus, by the Spirit. A lot of times what that it means is they don't know the Bible so much. And so they're just kind of just floating around going, as I feel things, you know, and that's a very dangerous place to be as well, because we're supposed to be to know him by spirit and truth. He's looking for those type of worshipers. And so if you're too much on the letter, the Torah side, a lot of times you get too stiff. You get too is one way to put it. Um, you're the Torah isn't everything. Again, you still need to know it, still need to live by it, but it's not everything. And then those that live by the Spirit, a lot of times they only know the last one third of the Bible. They don't know the first two thirds, and they kind of just go by their feelings, which can lead you into some very dangerous territories. And so it can lead you to a lot of errors. And so it's really by both. But it's really the Spirit. If we have the Spirit would lead us to do the Torah. So if you tell me that you have the Spirit and you're telling me that you're kind of against the Torah, I'm like, I'm not necessarily sure what Torah, what Spirit you have, because because really there's really just one faith, one people. There's a lot of divisions. I know it's confusing. Um, Anyways, I'll get off that topic. Just thought I'd rant for a second. Okay, in Galatians 6:2, bear another's burdens and so fulfill the law, the Torah of the Messiah, of Christ. And so, and this is what Judah is doing here. He's carrying, he's bearing the burdens. He's kind of not letting them know that uh, his brothers know that those that sold him into slavery, he's not condemning them. He's the way that he's handled, even being in prison, was just amazing. He wasn't bitter. He didn't get angry. He wasn't angry at God. It's like, wow. And so you've heard, you may have read in the Bible where there are people that ask Yeshua, you're like, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, to love Yah, God, and then to love your neighbors as yourself. And so, really, the whole Torah, because God is love, is really about relationships. This whole life, our life, is about relationships. And so, and again, as we saw here, Judah, when he was younger, did some stupid stuff. Now he's maturing, he's stepping up. And in 1 Timothy 5:8, the Bible says, but if anyone does not provide for his relatives, especially for the members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever, which some Bibles say infidel. And it's interesting. I can't say I know all the ins and outs because it says here, especially for the members of his household. Does that mean physical household? Does that mean spiritual household? I can't say that I know. Um, but I do believe that we have different types of families. Now, ideally, you want to take care of them both. Uh, my family, who are Roman Catholics, I love them. I get along with them. You know, we see things differently, and we can talk about that. That's fine. Doesn't mean I love them any less. You know, I can't push my beliefs on anyone. I could just share things with people. Do you want to agree? Great. If you don't, don't. You know, and so I'm that way with my spiritual warfare tactics as well. There's a lot of people that don't understand what it is that I'm talking about. They don't ask questions. I wish they would, because I could explain it. But anyways, moving on. Genesis 45. Joseph provides for his brothers and family, as we were just talking about. And so, again, Joseph here, he he could have handled it a much worse, more immature way. But he's like looking at the bigger picture, going, "Look, Elohim, God, has sent me before you to preserve life. Joseph knows the dreams that he got, a long time ago when he was a kid. And he didn't know how it was going to play out, but now it has. And he sent me to, preserve for you a remnant in the earth. Um, so you did not send me here, but Elohim, but God did. And so, well, I'll get to the questions in a minute. In 1 Peter 5:10, it says, and after you have suffered a little while, the Yah, the God of all grace, who has called you to this eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. There are times that we have to and will suffer, some more than others for whatever reasons. And can you trust Yah, God, in those times, even if you don't understand? Some of the laws in the Torah, excuse me, um, uh, by the rabbis, are called chukim, Chukim. And those are basically the laws that we do not understand. It's like, what kind of sense does that make? And the idea is you might will get more of a reward in heaven if you follow that one because you're just trusting Yah, God, in faith. You don't understand. And a lot of times we don't. Even in doing spiritual warfare, sanctification, deliverance ministry, we may get an idea, but we don't always get the answer. We try to get the solution, try to get the impression off people. We don't always know the details. Anyways, Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish, but he that keepeth the Torah, the law, happy is he. So it's many times, and I think we forget because we're very self-focused many times. At least I know I am at times. And so we're like, hey, it's about my problems, about this and this and this. And we don't really look at, again, the bigger picture of what in our family, in our loved ones, our nation, in the world. And so, yeah, God is trying to maneuver all this with, 8 billion plus people. How he does that blows my mind. Anyways, so sometimes we have to look at the bigger picture of what's going on. And so, but in the midst of that, if you don't know what to do, at least follow the Bible. Yes, the Torah, but also the Spirit. You know, knowing that at some point in time you might not get some understanding, get a vision later, a direction rather. And the question here is, are you going through a trial? Can you see the bigger picture of what Yah, God, is doing in your life? Because sometimes it's that hope that will carry you through. There's in this ministry, I have some challenges. I go back to things that I believe that He has given me hope, that He has others have prophesied, and even things that He showed me, that He's told me in little hints. But a lot of those weren't very strong. It's not like I got someone with a scroll. Hear ye, I proclaim. No, they're little tidbits of things. And some people may think that I'm crazy for doing that. Okay, whatever. Um, and sometimes I have to look at the bigger picture of what He's doing in my life to see how He's trying to mature me, to grow my faith. Do I trust Him? Is it easy? No. But I've seen Him enough. Um, there's different trials of different types and extremities. Um, but I've seen Him enough, know Him enough to know that He's real. And so I put my faith in Him even when I don't understand. Um, okay, moving on. Just want to see if anyone had any comments. Looking over there. No comments so far. So, again, there's chat if you want to chat now or later, or you can join Zoom without a camera if you don't want to do it that way. Um, so, moving on, Genesis 45. We see Joseph as a type of Yeshua, as a type of Jesus. Um, and it says here, this is a very interesting verse, Genesis 45:27. But when they spoke to him all the words which Joseph had spoken to them, I think they are his brothers. Sometimes all the use of pronouns in the Bible just, I'm like, who's talking to who? Anyways, um, and when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to transport him, the spirit of Jacob, their father, revived. Hmm, that's an interesting verse. So, I don't know, you may not know this, but way back, when did I do this? Let me look. Yeah, 2022. I did a live stream L36 uh, on based on 2 Corinthians 7 verse 1 that talks about human spirit defilement. And a lot of people think that our human spirit is spotless white and wrinkle free and that, it may sit in the throne room at the feet of Yeshua or, of the Father God, just 24/7 just worshiping and no, 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 it doesn't work that way. It sounds good. Um, but the Bible says in many, many places that our spirit can get anguished, can be sorrowful, can be poisoned, can be broken, can be crushed, can be wayward, can have no rest, can be troubled. All this other stuff. Again, you can watch that live stream 36 if you want. I'm just saying that get this over here on the right screen. There we go. Um, our human spirit is very humanesque. It has the same characteristics. Excuse me. Okay. There might be a sneeze coming on, just to let you know. It has the same uh, characteristics as your soul does. It gets confused. It has a lot of questions. And so if you there's a YouTube playlist on the redemptive gifts that Walk with Yah has. If you want to know more about your spirit, I suggest you look at that, or go to the Sapphire Leadership Group, Arthur Burke. Look at all of his free redemptive gift teachings. That'll keep you busy for a while. Anyways, we are very complex, and so our human spirit is a very integral, needed part of us that Yah is starting to give out revelation in these days. Why? Because I think it's needed. And so he's starting to move in a different way. And if you're stuck in the old way, I'll let you finish that thought. Okay, moving on. Genesis 46. Joseph brings his family to Egypt. And so, yeah, God speaks to Israel, to Jacob, um, in visions of the night. And he says, Jacob, Jacob. I want to give you a little hint. In the Bible, or even if the Godhead speaks to you and he says something twice, you had better pay attention because he's like, I'm not messing around. When something is stated twice, it's important. It's very important. So He's saying here, he's telling Jacob, hey, don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. You know, I'll be with you. Be- why does he tell Jacob this? Because Jacob had a fear. Because if Jacob remembered, you know, Abraham and Isaac, the things that happened to them, he might be like, uh-uh. Like, I want to go down there. And so, yeah, God is comforting him. Questions. Has Yah ever reassured you or reminded you to calm you? Has he ever not reassured you when you wanted it? And why might he not give those reassurances? So, as I was saying earlier, sometimes those prophetic words you got to hang on to. Um, not all, prophetic words are valid. That's another point. But, anyways, but some are. The ones you can ask the Godhead which ones, is that a valid prophecy? Anyways, but yes, sometimes, yes, he will comfort us. He will remind us, of course. But there is those times where he won't, um, where we would really like to hear him. And I believe that sometimes because he doesn't always want us to go based on feelings, but rather on faith, rather on the truth of his word. And it's like, look, I've already told you, you can trust me, and I need to step back and see what you do at this point. Like we talked about in the last video cast, that he tests us all the time. And so he may not give those reassurances because that might be a time for you to grow. Like he wants us to mature in faith. And that, if you're a parent and you have a baby, you are not always tending to that baby's every need. You're like, hey, you're going to have to learn how to grow up and do this for yourself. Kind of the same thing. All right, I think it's pretty easy to understand. I'll move on. So, Jacob 46, we see Jacob and Joseph are knighted. Genesis 47, um, we see that the famine starts to hit. There was no food in all the land, for the famine was very severe. Um, again, I'll just state that I think we're very close to the tribulation, to the start of, if we haven't already. Okay, Genesis 47. And so basically, the people were going to Joseph, who's second in command in Egypt at this point in time. They're like, hey, we don't have anything to give you. All we can give you is our bodies and our land. And so we will basically, if you give us food, and land for food, we'll, we with our land will be servants to Pharaoh. And when I made this teaching, I think I had a point there, but I can't remember what it is now. Anyways, I do have some questions, but let's go over some verses first. All right, just looking, seeing no questions yet. Okay, great. So in John 8:36, so if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. Hmm. Okay. Because a lot of people think, I have freedom in Yeshua. I have freedom in Jesus. And they sometimes take that a little bit farther than I think they should. In 1 Corinthians 6, verse 19, the Bible says, do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body. And in Romans 6:15, shall we sin because we are not under Torah, but under grace? Let it not be. Do you not know that to whom you present yourself servants for obedience, you are servants of the one whom you obey, whether of sin and death or of obedience to righteousness? Having been set free from sin you've basically become slaves or servants of righteousness. You are free. You have the freedom to do righteousness at this point. And if you're still, none of us are perfect, I get it. But habitually, if you're still going back to something, you're a slave to that, which is a lot of times an unclean spirit. You just may not see it that way. And so yes, you are free in Yeshua. Yes, your freedom to choose to do the right thing. You're no longer bound, but now you become a slave of righteousness, to do good, to do his will. Your body has been bought at a price. And so in a lot of the churches today, and a lot of people across, not even in churches, but they don't like mentioning the word discipline. They're just like, I have freedom and all this type of stuff. But that will get you in trouble. Like Yeshua Jesus did not free you just for you to become a slave to sin again. And so you may not be as free as you think you are. I'll just put it that way. And so, uh, but I pray that you choose to live the Bible, to live by His Word, because we're citizens of heaven, and where there's a heaven where He is King, the Bible is basically our constitution, our covenant, as He calls it, which is, I believe, based largely on the Torah, although we don't get into heaven through the Torah. Um, okay, I want to move on. So here's a question. If Yah, if he knows the future, why did he send the Jews to Egypt? Because obviously they became slaves. Obviously he saw that, there would be a famine. Obviously he knows that, in Egypt that they served all these other gods. That they thought that Pharaoh um, thought that he himself was a god. But yet this is where God sends them? Like, what? Like, is this a good plan? And his ways are higher than our ways, obviously. And so I found this on this website. Um, and there are some reasons why he did that. One, uh, he wanted to isolate the Jews from the rest of uh, uh, from all the rest of the people. So that way, in Goshen, where the Jews were, they could all be in their Jewish, towns and stuff like that, and they could keep their cultural isolation. They could be around other Jews. They could, not get mixed in with all the other ones, with all the other peoples. And so, because even we see in Genesis 43:32 that as high as Joseph was, he was second in the land. There was no one. This guy had all kinds of power, but still, even then, he was still an outsider. Because it says in Genesis 43:32, the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews because that was an abomination to them. So as powerful as, Joseph was, and they appreciate him, they're like, you're still not one of us. Don't forget. And so there was also a physical separation. We went over, in the last, the Bible talks about how, Judah and others, they got intermixed with all the people in Canaan, and it went really bad really fast. And so he had to physically separate the Jews. Um, in While the Jews were in Egypt, they focused, they were forced to focus on Yah, and the reliance on him. That mostly came through Moses, and even that was challenging. Um, and there was a national formation where they were there and their numbers grew. And so even though the conditions were harsh, he was protecting his people for a bigger purpose. Again, as I was saying before, we may not understand the problems that we individually are going through, even in the U.S., because I think the U.S. is not a very Christian nation. As much as it wants to believe that it is, there are a lot of good Christians and Bible believers here. Yes, there are. But overall, the U.S. nation has a lot of evil, big corporations, Hollywood, all, government, all kinds of stuff. That is where the evil is rampant. So, so do you see similarities in the challenges we face in the world today? And I just named some of them, and that's on a government, corporate, society level. Um, do you see any other challenges that we face in the world today? And so Hollywood makes it very easy to see because they have all their demonic worship and stuff like that. But even in all these other places, with the banking, with the judges, with the lawfare, with in every other area, we're basically battling, you know, unclean spirits uh, on every level. These people just don't see it that way because now we have science, and so anyways. So, but do you also see that Yah God works at times within cultural and other boundaries? Like he will make changes that may seem drastic to us, um, but sometimes he doesn't push it too far. It's kind of like, for example, you have um, slavery, and in the Torah, the laws regarding slavery uh, were some of the best ways to deal with slaves back then. What they were doing back then in the Torah was unheard of. And he was like, hey, you need to give them some respect. He couldn't push the boundary so far. He had to work within those cultural norms and stuff that, he can't just say, well, there shouldn't be any slaves. Like they weren't ready for that. And so he can only push so much. I did a short a video here um, a little bit ago, I think in the past month, that says your faith will determine how much that Yah God can work in your life. Even as I said earlier, there's a lot of things that I share people with about spiritual warfare, and they can't go there. They're just like, no. And I'm like, it's in the Bible. Like, if you let me show you, I'll show you. And so, but they can't go there. And so, Yah, God can't always move the way he would prefer because we tend to shut him down. Okay, I'm gonna move on. All right, so go into the Haftarah, Ezekiel 37. So I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Let me do this. There we go. In case I need to bring up the Bible here. Valley of the dry bones before that. Um, and if anyone likes my coloring in eSword, well, I only do it in the Bible called the Scriptures. It's like I can, well, I don't know how to parse that out, but I could send you some of my coloring. I could, if you have eSword, I could send those files, but it might overwrite your other stuff. Anyways, just a thought. Anyways, so Ezekiel 37. Um, okay, so Yah, God is talking to Ezekiel, saying, hey, the people, the Jewish people should not defile themselves anymore with their idols and their detestable things, because again, the Jewish people had a propensity just to get influenced by those other nations around them, other countries, peoples around them. And he said, Yah says, but I will save them from all the backslidings in which they have sinned, and I will cleanse them. And they shall be my people, and I will be their God. My servant David shall be king over them shall be king over them, and they shall all have one shepherd. Why do I put emphasis on the shall? Because basically he's prophesying. He's saying this will happen. When you say God, when you see him say shall, it's like that's a prophecy. So they shall walk in my rules and be careful to obey my statutes. And so they shall dwell in the land which I gave to my servant Jacob. Which, if you didn't know, David never conquered all the land that was given, that Yah, God, wanted us, told us that, or told the Jewish people rather, to take. All that land was never taken. And so, anyways, we'll get to that in a moment. So then let's jump down to the apostolic writings, John 10. And he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the people. But the hireling he's hired doesn't care about the sheep, and he will leave you. Uh, I see some of these people like, Sean Diddy Combs and others like that uh, those in Hollywood, again, it's very easy for them to see sometimes that they are very satanic. And it's interesting that they get what they want for a while. But then at some point in time, the unclean spirits will leave them, that they will have to suffer in prison or whatever. And I tell, the witches and warlocks this. I'm like, look, you'll get what you want for a time, but there will be a price to pay. And if you knew what that price was before you try to get all your power and money and, and sex or whatever, like you wouldn't have done it. But the enemy doesn't work that way. They work in deception because they know if you know the truth, you're not going to do it. Anyways, um, the questions I have here: what does it mean to be Yah's, God's people? To be a son, a daughter of the King, to even be a sheep. So I was stating in Ezekiel 37, he's talking about these things in the future. They shall be my people. I will be their God. My servant David shall be king over them. Which King David, he hasn't come back yet. He's not ruling over us yet again, although the Bible says that he will. And they shall walk in my rules and be careful to obey my statutes, which is again his Torah. So all that to say is that the Torah, as I've explained many times before, will be doing that again in the future. Third temple, sacrifices will return. If you do not do the Torah in the millennial reign, you will not get rain. You may get cursed with plagues, as the Bible says. So I'm like, okay, well, if we have to do the Torah in the past and we have to do it in the future, it would kind of make sense that we still got to do it. Many more arguments there. Not going to get too much into that. Um, and that's kind of, as I was alluding to before, that's what it means to be the son, daughter of a king. A son, um, typically, many times, will follow his father's footsteps, will follow his leading, will kind of, continue doing the business as his father did. Um, may not be the best wording there, but we are to carry out our father's will. And so the daughter, every person, even our human spirits, they are, they can be male or female. And so, our human spirit portions, rather, I believe my servant and my mercy are actually female. And the rest of mine, um, prophet, teacher, exhorter, giver, ruler, are male. Don't think gender. That has nothing to do with gender. It has to do with the concept of giving and receiving. But the point I was trying to get at is each of us has a daughter of being a son or a daughter. Whether you're a biological male, biological female, doesn't really matter. What does a son do? Again, you carry out the will. You go do stuff. You make stuff happen. Even if you're biological female, you can still do that. In that son role, you can do that. If you're a daughter tends to be, more sitting at the feet of Yeshua type of thing. You know, I might even said before that our right hand side, which is Yeshua, Yeshua is the right arm of Yah. That's what the Bible says. That that's the dominion part. It's believed that the left part side is the intimacy side. And so you can switch roles in between. Sometimes it's you want to play the role of the son, other times you want to play the role of the daughter. Um, okay. So I was laughing because I had that question, what does it mean to be a sheep? And I was right before we started, I looked at it because in my mind, you've heard the maybe you've heard the saying, the cultural norms, like, you're, stupid sheep. You're just, being led and just, and I looked up, um, like how dumb is a sheep or are, sheep dumb or something like that. And I saw that is entirely not true at all. That they're stupid. They're actually pretty smart, and um, I will have to do a teaching on that. And so, anyways, uh, but we have a good shepherd, and we are sheep, which you just might want to look it up. And so, I don't remember it all off the top of my head, but um, to be a sheep doesn't mean that you're stupid. I'll just put it that way. It means that you adapt. It means you're very adaptable, is one thing that it means, is that you do have some intelligence. So, just something to think about. Okay, no questions. Not seeing any questions in the chat. So, moving on. Um, to the next Bible verse reading, Vayakai, starting with Genesis 47. There talks about Joseph and the famine, Genesis 48, where Jacob blesses Ephraim and Manasseh. And it's interesting because there Joseph takes his sons um, to Jacob, the patriarch, and Jacob doesn't do the cultural norm. He basically took his right hand and put it on Ephraim, who was the younger one, because usually the cultural norm is the bless the one that's older. And he takes his left hand and puts it on Manasseh. He kind of does this type of deal. And Joseph's like, hold on, like you're doing that all wrong. And he's like, no, 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 no. I know what I'm doing. And so, and we see sometimes in the Bible um, where the cultural norms are broken. And we see this. Why would Jacob break cultural norms? A little typo there. See Genesis 48, verse 19. Because at this point in time in Genesis 48, let's go there. 48, 48, somewhere around 13. Yeah, I want to jump ahead for a second. Um, and again, Joseph's like, hey, like, you're doing it the wrong way. He's like, no, you got to put your hands this way. And Jacob's like, uh-uh. He's like, I know, I got it. He kind of prophesies over them, says, he will become a people and he's also great, meaning Manasseh. But yet his younger brother is greater. And so we see um, that Yah sometimes talks to Jacob. It doesn't explicitly state that that was done here. But as we go into chapter 49, we'll get to that in a moment, where he starts prophesying over his sons. But we see here that again, the cultural norms were broken. And so sometimes uh, that happens. We see that actually happen with Jacob and Esau, where Esau came out first. Jacob was holding onto his heel when he came out when they came out of the womb. You're like, all right, Jacob, you're a supplanter. You're trying to take from your brother, and but yet Jacob was given the birthright because Esau gave it up unwisely, and so God could have done that another way, but he had to go with work within what he had between Jacob and Esau. So sometimes, God will break our cultural norms. He's not necessarily bound by what we think should be how it should work. And then we see in Genesis 48:15, and let's see, go back there a little bit. Yeah, and then Israel, Jacob, another name for Jacob, blesses Joseph, and he said, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, who's been my shepherd, the angel who has redeemed me." The Hebrew word is Gaal. I think it's another derivative of Goel. The angel who has redeemed me from all evil. Bless the boys, and in them my name should be carried on. Okay, so let's work chronologically here. What does walk infer? We talked about this before in some of the other video casts. I'll go over this again. The Hebrew word is halach. Um, you may have heard there's a word called halakha, which basically means how do you walk out your relationship with with God? How do you follow his commands? How do you, uh, you know, walk in front of him, walk beside him? Um, Actually, that just reminded me. There was a teaching I wanted to watch about somewhere in the Bible. It changed from walking beside to walking in front, and what that meant. That was a note to myself. Anyways, so basically, when you see in the Bible when Enoch walked with and then he was taken away, that means that he had a relationship with with God that was so pure, that was the way that God prescribed, that blessed him. We see in many times, uh, a lot of times, that where the word walk, that's what it means, which is why uh, Yah actually told me what to name this ministry. Walk with Yah. And so what it means is I'm trying to teach people how to walk in spirit and truth, you know, by their spirit, but also by the word, um, because that's what we're called to do. And so that's where the name comes from. That's what it means. When you see walk with Yah, that means, okay, we got to carry out his commands. How do we do that? Okay, moving on. Verse 16, the angel who has redeemed me. So that word goel, um, and it's interesting because there's not a big emphasis given on the angel. This says the angel. But that word goel, means kinsman redeemer. And so there are some others in the Bible that are famous for this. Um, when we see Ruth in the book of Ruth, you have, oh, good gosh, why can't I remember his name? Give me a second. All right, you'll know his name. You probably already know his name. You're probably like, no, good Lord. How embarrassing. That's what I get for being human. Um, oh, good Lord. Let's just go to Ruth for a second. Excuse me. Um, Boaz. Thank you. Ah, thank you, Esword. Um, yeah, so Boaz was a kinsman redeemer. And so even though Ruth was a Moabite, actually, and so he redeemed a, a person, a Moabite, someone that wasn't Jewish, that was actually against the culture as a whole was against the Jewish people. They were kind of cursed, but she got favor. And so he was another kinsman redeemer. But the angel who redeemed me from all evil, who's the only angel that can do that? Is Yeshua. So here we have this pre-incarnate version of Yeshua, Jesus, that's in the Bible. Kind of interesting. So moving on to Genesis 49. I was saying that um, in Genesis 49, Jacob blesses his sons. And, all 13 of them, now including, Manasseh and Ephraim and Manasseh. And he says, I declare to you what is to befall you in the last days. Some Bibles will say, in the times to come. Um, and then he says, gather together and hear, you sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel, your father. And it's believed in the Bible that these are the first prophecies given by a man. Because before it was, many times, God was like, hey, I'm going to do this. Like, keep your eyes open. It's going to happen. And at this point in time, now we got Jacob who's starting to prophesy again, starting in Genesis 48:19 over Ephraim and Manasseh. And so we see here Jacob, he uses the name Jacob, then he says Israel. Why does he do this? Because it's believed that at this point in time, he's now understanding. He's like, oh, like I was that person, I'm now becoming this person. And so, there's this kind of battle within me because sometimes throughout the Bible, Yah will refer to him as Israel, sometimes as Jacob. When he's not doing so good, he's called Jacob. It's kind of like when your parents, when you were younger, called you and they called you by your full name, including the middle name, you were in trouble. And so, same concept. Regarding Genesis 49, 3, verse 7, let's take a look at it. Okay, it's talking about Reuben and Simeon because they did some evil stuff. Um, and if sins are forgiven, does that mean that they are forgotten or the consequences of that sin have been removed? And the answer is no. And so while you're on earth, there could still be consequences even if you're forgiven. Um, sometimes there are things in play that are um, that you can't really take back. You can't change. They've already done. I did a live stream called Apocaloptimism, and basically I was talking about how God has to judge the United States, and I gave this I think it's Second Kings. Anyways, that live stream, Apocaloptimism, um, where I gave the example. Was it Joash? I think it was Joash, where he was king, and basically the Torah gets found again in the temple because they lost it. They've been I think that was after the Babylonian Persian times, I believe. I could be wrong on that. Anyways, so Joash is like, okay, hey, Like he's traumatized. He's like, oh my gosh, like we're so away from what God has told us to do. And he's like, okay, we need to start doing this, all this stuff again. And so he does. And God's like, great. Hey, thank you for instituting that. You will die, a fairly pleasant death, not as painful, but it's too little too late. And so therefore, I'm going to still have to judge the nation. And I kind of believe that's happening with the US. And so that, yeah, God still has to judge the United States. Another example is in 2 Samuel 12, 13, 14, where this is David and his prophet Nathan, King David, and King and Nathan's like, Yah has forgiven you. But the consequences of your sin are still in play, and your son, the baby that you're about to have through Bathsheba, is going to die. And so, anyways, just let you know how that works. Spiritual warfare doesn't always work the way we think that it should. Um, but his ways are higher than our ways, and he's always right. Um, and so we get to Genesis 49, verse 7. And so here's something very interesting I thought was kind of neat. Um, Jacob is basically saying, look, Simeon, Levi, because you killed some people way back when your sister Dinah was raped and stuff like that. In your fierceness, you killed the whole town. So cursed be their displeasure for your first wrath, and their wrath is cruel. I divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. I think that might be a typo, 49:7. No, no, it's Simon. Yeah, Simon. Okay. Anyways, and so the question I have is, can you overcome a curse? If a person gives it to you, yes, there are ways to deal with it. A lot of people deal with spiritual warfare, though. They're like, hey, like I'm just going to say a simple prayer, and or I got the blood of Jesus, and that's all I need. And many times it's more than that. And so I'm not going to get into all that right now. And so, but yes, if you do it learn about spiritual warfare, sometimes hey, a prayer will work. Sometimes yes, it does work. Yes, I'm not going to discount that totally. For whatever reason. And so other times you got to do a little more digging. Um, but in this case, um, it seems like all these other prophecies are getting right and are becoming true, what Jacob's saying, and they do get divided. And so, however, in the case of Levi, it became a good thing that they got divided because Levi later in Exodus 32, the people of Levi, they got tested. They were right after, the golden calf incidents. So at that point in time, Moses, comes down from the mountain, and Moses is like, ugh. Now I want you people to go kill your brothers, the ones that did this golden calf stuff, because, again, all this paganism and stuff like that. And they're like, this is a very serious matter. We talked about that in the last live stream as well. Sometimes there are times where things are so serious. God's like, I'm not playing around. Like, I'm not going to be cute and cuddly right now. Like, there's a lot hinging on this. And so, therefore, this is not the time to want me to be cute and cuddly. And so, at this point in time, um, 32, 26, 28, he basically says, again, um, go and take these people out. And all the sons of Levi, they go and they slayed all their brothers. The sons of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and about 3,000 of them got killed. And so that was a tough test. That was a tough time. But they broke that curse that Jacob put on them. And so yes, you can break a curse, sometimes through obedience, you know, many different ways. And I kind of referred to this either before. I'm going to go to this other question. Do prophecies always come true? No. There are many reasons for that. Sometimes the person that gives you a prophesy may not be right. Various reasons for that. But even if they are right, that doesn't always mean 100% it's going to happen. Sometimes you have to partner with Yah, to God, to make it happen. As I was saying earlier, in this ministry, Walk with Yah, I just didn't sit back and just be like, okay, he's going to make the ministry happen. I'm not going to do anything. I had to grow to kind of test it out and step out in a little bit of faith. And there's still things that haven't come to pass, but I believe they will, as long as I'm faithful. And there are other prophecies that will come to pass regardless of what you do or what you don't do. You may or may not know which ones those are. So it can be tricky sometimes. And so, but we have to also be careful again of testing those people that speak prophecies over us. We need to check in with the Godhead to ask him, hey, like, is this valid? Because sometimes they're not. And so sometimes people can put all their faith into a particular word that they liked, but it may not necessarily be what God was saying. And so just be careful with that. And so I know a lot of people think that, I've been foolish for the ones that I followed. It's not easy. But out of a relationship, you can work your way through it. Okay, Genesis 49, verse 10. This is interesting. The scepter shall not turn aside from Judah. And this is Jacob prophesying over his sons. Okay. And so, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes. There's a lot going on here. And to him is the obedience, that discipline I was talking about, of peoples. And then 11, verse 11, binding his donkey to the vine, his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he washed his garments in wine and his robes in the blood of grapes. Take a breath, breathe. There's a lot going on here. I won't have the ability to get all into it completely. Okay, so we know that Yeshua, Jesus, came from the tribe of Judah. And it talks about a lawgiver from his loins, between his feet, from the womb, until Shiloh comes. Okay, questions. Who gave the Torah, the law, at Mount Sinai? There's a video, it's a two-part video um, by Eddie Chumney. I got the link there. That basically he kind of goes through, and he gives his thoughts, which makes sense to me, that basically state that Yeshua, Jesus, was the one that gave the Torah at Mount Sinai because he is the written and the living word, right? So kind of makes sense. But Eddie Chumney, it's an older video, but still good. And he kind of talks about, hey, this is why if you look at this verse, this verse, this verse, this verse, that type of stuff. And so again, we saw in another earlier spot today where Yeshua, Jesus, was making a pre-incarnation visit. Okay, what does Shiloh mean? He's whose right it is. And there's a lot of different takes on what that word means. It means peace. It means this, it means that. And he's whose right it is. And that's from the Peshitta. If you don't know, in the East, Israel, you know, Africa over there, that side of the world, um, versus us here in the North America, South America, the West. Um, there is a Bible version known as the Peshitta, which is a very, very important biblical version. It's not written in English. I think it's Syriac, I think, or Aramaic, duh. And so, and and there has been very little changes. It's been mostly preserved. Whereas in the West, of the United States and such, do you know how many Bible versions that we have? Over 450. So, um, the Aramaic, if you didn't know, is a sister language to Hebrew, and so they're very alike. And so, um, much longer story there, but basically, a lot of people in the West don't know about the Peshitta, but it's very important Bible version, if you will. And so, but that's what the Peshitta says that Shiloh means. And so now, if we look at 49 Genesis 49:10 verses 11, this is very interesting. Um, could verse 10 be referring to Yeshua's first coming? He came to give the Torah. He came again, starting in Matthew with the Gospels. He came there to fulfill, to show us, not to say that he came to do away with it, but he came to fulfill, to be an example how to live the Torah. And so, um, and as I said earlier, also as well, Yeshua's like, hey, like if you love me, you'll obey my commands. And so that was his first visit. But we look in verse 11, his second coming, because here he's talking about his robes in the blood of grapes. And I didn't have it here, but that's referring to Revelation, a book in Revelation. Um, and so, which is why I believe that that's talking about the second coming of Yeshua. So, um, okay, moving on. Genesis 49, verse 17, talks about Dan. Uh, Dan is a serpent, by the way, an adder by the path that bites the horse's heel so that he is a rider that falls backwards. I wait for your salvation, for your deliverance, O Yah. And so Jacob here is speaking about Dan, and this actually came true because Dan was a tribe that had prominence, but then after a while they kind of they weren't doing so good. They weren't so healthy. They did some stuff I don't think they should have been doing, and they kind of shrunk. Um, and then I don't think the two are connected, although you might see a connection. Because right here, Jacob kind of stands back and he's like, I wait for your deliverance, for your salvation, O God. That word salvation or deliverance is Yeshua, which means savior or deliverer. And this is the first time in the Bible where the word Yeshua is used. I just find it interesting, again, that it's talking about, the serpent and stuff like that, talking about Dan, referring to Dan, but it's also talking about the need of a savior. So in my mind, I'm like, well, there's kind of a tie to the enemy, Satan, you know, not just Dan, but serpent using him, maybe. I don't know. I'll let you decide. So Genesis 49, then we get into Jacob's death and burial. Genesis 50, Yah's good purposes. Again, uh, Jacob dies. Joseph's brothers are, oh dear Lord, our fathers died. And now Joseph has all the power and he might change his mind and kill us all. And so they make up this story and they're like, hey, dad said, like, you have to be nice to us because they were very concerned. It's kind of believe that they were, lying. And so, and Joseph starts weeping at this time. And it's wondered, hey, was Joseph weeping because they didn't know who Joseph was yet? Like they didn't believe him? Anyways, Joseph still he takes the place of righteousness, says, "Hey, I'm not in the place of God. You intended evil against me, but Elohim, but Yah intended it for good." Kind of like very much like the Romans 8:28, that what the enemy intends for us, Yah can use for good if we handle it the right way. And so um, sometimes when doing spiritual warfare, in working with the unclean spirits and the demons and stuff, they get tripped up by their own pride. Many times they believe wholeheartedly the evil plans that they have are going to come to pass, and they try to convince you of that, try to convince everyone else of that. Um, I've had some of the unclean spirits tell me just God's not going to do anything. Like he's because they've gotten away with things for so long, in the bloodlines, for hundreds, thousands of years. And so I can kind of see that until people, God's people, stand up and try to fight them because a lot of them haven't been challenged before. And so we have to learn that we are called to be warriors, disciples, um, to fight back against them, knowing that, yeah, God is with us. It will be a battle, but ultimately we will win if we have the faith. And so, and then sometimes I've seen, clients have seen, where there will be a big unclean spirit, holding a spear and a shield or other types or whatever, really big ones. And all of a sudden, we'll just see like meteors coming down on them. They're like, "What the heck?" Or, they'll shrink or however it is it happens. Um, when we come out of agreement with them, even recently, we were dealing with this a client's mind of the different portions, and we were dealing with the portions. They were coming into alignment with Jezebel, and Jezebel was taunting them, going, "Don't you dare come out of alignment with me!" Like was basically punching and even stabbing some of the human spirit portions. But the more that the human spirit would actually encourage those portions, teacher, exhorter, whatever, and be like, hey, like you can do this. And, um, they would have to recover. And then uh, they would say, no, Jezebel. They would get in her face and be like, no, you will no longer rule over me. And Jezebel would shrink every time. And so the last one that we got to, I forgot which one it was. Um, I was like, hey, I just want to let you know every time we get to renouncing Jezebel, like she comes and she sucker punches one of y'all. And so this human spirit was just kind of like he was kind of like on guard, like waiting for the sucker punch. And basically saw Jezebel in the spirit and was like, like I denounce you. And so yeah, crazy stuff. Spiritual warfare is interesting. And so again, it's a different way of looking at the Bible and how it plays out. Um, but we have to, even though the enemy intends evil for us, it can be an opportunity also for us to advance if we have enough faith. And again, that might mean learning about spiritual warfare. Um, Genesis 50, Joseph pasts, and I think that is the end of, yeah. So we are done with the book of Genesis. So much going on in Genesis. Um, Oops. There we go. All right, moving on. First Kings chapter 2. So we see this kind of playing out again. The Haftarah is basically uh, thematically showing again, like, hey, this is playing out again because, as it states in Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything just repeats, which is why um, when I opened up this live stream, this video cast, um, I was talking about the new year. The Jewish people don't call it the new year. They call it, or biblically, it's called the turn of the year because time is cyclical. It turns. And so which is why we're always trying to learn from the past is to not repeat it. Anyways, so First Kings 2. And this is David talking to Solomon. Guard the charge of Yah, your Elohim, walk in his way, guard his laws, his commands, right rulings, witnesses, as is written in the Torah of Moshe. Walk to walk uh, which Yah spoke to David, going, if, which is the biggest word in the Bible, if your sons guard their way to walk before me, again, walk, how to carry out his commands, how to do the Torah, and how to live by the Spirit. It's not just the Torah, it's how to, let your spirit lead. Um, with all their heart and being, with all their being, including your spirit, portions, human spirit and portions, um, you know, you will have this blessing. So we're just seeing that theme played out again. The apostolic writings, 1 Peter 2. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles, some Bibles say pilgrims, to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct honorable, um, so that when people speak to you against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds, your good works, and glorify Yah, God, on the day of visitation. A lot going on here too. Okay, so what do sojourners and pilgrims mean? Many verses here that basically say that we're not of this earth. And so Yeshua said that. We are told that. And I believe that there's many believers, people that go to church that are very earthly bound. They have a hard time, you know, keeping their mind focusing on the things above. It's a balance. But basically, we live in two different worlds. And so, but you can't be so focused on this world. Um, in ministry, uh, I regularly deal with those that are in the afterlife. And so, and some of those people, they actually have a legal right to go to heaven sometimes. And so they've believed in Yeshua. They've, went to church. However, they were still very earthly focused. And so they hung around. So they were still kind of floating around the earth, whatever, because they're like, my family still needs me, having the savior complex. Or, they were, I liked my house or I liked my car or whatever. Because when you die, all you do is you lose this flesh and you uh, stop that for a second. There we go. So all you do is lose this flesh. You still have all your same thoughts, attitudes, beliefs, everything in the afterlife, in the spirit realm. You may see things very differently. Sometimes with dealing with soul fragments, they may see that they're on a different planet. They may see that you may see the demons clearly. They may think that they're at grandma's house. They may think that they're in a black room that has no doors. And so, again, it's the spirit realm. Um, when Many years ago, when my brother-in-law passed, my sister had passed uh, prior to that, but many years ago, I don't know, 5 or so years ago, He was in the hospital, went to go visit him. Uh, I think that was around the COVID time. Yeah, it was. And so it was weird because me and my brother walked in the hospital and we just walked right on up there. They were like, "How'd you get up here?" We were like, "I don't know. We just walked in." And so, kind of like a divine appointment, basically, is the point I'm making. And they only allowed two people in the room because he was out unconscious, um, and had a breathing apparatus on him. And so I went with my niece, and I went to go speak to him. And I knew he was out, but I knew also that his spirit could hear. And so I started speaking to him. I was like, "Hey, don't worry about the family. We'll take care of him. Don't stay back. Like, you need to go to heaven, to where Yeshua, to where Yah is. Like, do not hold back. Don't worry about the family. We will take care of them." And I heard in my mind, he was like, "Thank you, Noe." But he had a thick, a Mexican accent. And I was just like, "Okay, good. I'm glad you heard me." And so his spirit was telling me, "Hey, like, thank you much. Thank you for letting me know that, and give me that reassurance." As I was saying earlier in this live stream, that our spirit has a lot of very emotional, can be very emotional also as well. And so, um, yeah, there's much more to us than this earthly life. So, all right, I want to move on. Go back and share. Here we go. All right. Are we called to do good works and righteousness? Why? Um, because with some people, Bible believers, they're like all against works. Like, no, we don't have to do anything. Like, a little bit of confusion there. And so we don't do works to get into heaven. Like, that doesn't work. And so, but we do good works because we are saved. And so there's many, many, many Bible verses that talk about this. And let me see. Let's see 1 John 2:29. Well, let's go to that one. Let's just see one of these. 1 John 2. Yeah. That if you know that he is righteous, that everyone born is doing righteousness, which means that, again, and what is the righteousness? Is we don't define righteousness. His Torah defines righteousness. And so, and then it also says in these Revelation verses that Yah, God, will share his glory with us, which is a good reason to want to do this stuff. Now, what does that mean? What are the ramifications of that? Like, the those are eternal rewards. And so if you are thinking, hey, like, um, my 401k, my IRA is, my reward, you're thinking very small. Like, you need to think much bigger than that. Like, that's going to be gone. When this earth is gone, that means nothing. And so, anyways, so you can check out those verses. I suggest you do. Um, okay. I think we have come to the end of this live stream. And so I'm going to ask a question. Let me take this off here. All right. Move some things around here. There we go. Now I can see myself. Okay. What time is it? 1:05. So we've been going at this at an hour and a half. Um, Yeah, I was debating whether I should do this now or whether I should make a video out of this. I think I'm going to do it now. I have a question. Do you see your challenges that you have in life? Not all of them, but a lot of them. Um, and do you see your temptations as demonic attacks? Because I have a lot of people that come to me and, they may want to go see their psychiatrist or their doctor. And again, we're very complicated beings. But a lot of the stuff that we're battling is just spiritual, unclean spirits, our demons and such. Um, by the way, I don't think the reason I say unclean spirits is because not all unclean spirits are demons, although all demons are unclean spirits. Um, so, anyways, we have to have this understanding in the spirit realm. There are a lot of abstract concepts. It states in uh, Hebrews that faith is a substance, and in the spirit realm, I believe it's a very real substance, such as depression or something like that. There can also be unclean spirits that are also named depression, fear, that are actually entities. They have wills, they have, memories, they have characteristics, you know. And I think many people forget, even many people that believe the Bible, because again, we tend to think of scientific terms in terms of knowledge, that we forget that we are spiritual beings. And many people don't see that the attacks that they have, if you have anger that comes against you, if you have fear, if you have all this other stuff, financial, health, relationships, marriage, are they all demonic? I can't say all of them, but a lot of them, more than you probably think. And because we can't see, unless you're a seer, um, we don't tend to think in those terms. Now, granted, we can have a level of fear, concern, anger. There is righteous anger, righteous indignation, as some people call it. Even Yeshua got angry. But he qualified that. He handled it the right way, for the right amount of time, for the right reason, for all these different things that he did, that he handled it righteously. But I see a lot of people that don't handle it righteously. And so when you do that, you can open the door for an unclean spirit to come in. And they are very sneaky. And so a lot of times we don't understand, we don't realize that that is what's causing a problem. With again, whether it's even if it's a physical manifestation, the unclean spirits, they can get in your brain, they can get in your eyes, they can get in your mouth, your tongue, your heart, organs, feet, whatever. Um, they can stop the flow of stuff on a spiritual level as well as a physical level. And so we are very metaphysical beings. And so a lot of people don't know what it is that they're fighting. And so these temptations and stuff that the enemy has given us, they're trying to set us up. They're trying to just, as I was talking about Joseph earlier, like he handled it so righteously. And I'm like amazed. I'm like, wow. Like if I were in prison, I hope I could do that good. In prison unrighteously for the wrong reasons. Um, and so, we see Judah stepping up to the plate, maturing. Um, and the people back then, um, again, they didn't have the science that we did today. And we may sometimes think that they were stupid, kind of like I did with the sheep. I'm like, yeah, stupid sheep. And then come to find out, oh, they're a lot smarter than I thought. And the people back then were a lot smarter than what we think a lot of times. They knew that there is unclean spirits. When you look at, the Proverbs and Psalms, and again, this is why in this video cast, I'm trying to look at the Bible from a very spiritual lens because that is really going on. And the enemy tries to convince us of science, of COVID and the vaccines and all this other stuff. If you look at the neuroscience, the neurobots and all that type of stuff that's coming on, it's pretty scary stuff. How it'll work with 5G and 6G, and it's going to get all in our head and all that type of stuff. It's coming. And so all this AI type stuff. Um, and if you fall into that trap, it's going to be much harder to get out of. And so the people back then, they, in some ways, were very much smarter than we were. Again, though, I see David when I look at the Psalms that he's prophesying, he's singing these songs and they're talking about some earthly thing, but then he weaves over into the spiritual realm and starts talking about these spiritual concepts. And then he weaves back in, and we kind of got to do the same thing because, again, we're living in two different realms. And so I just want you to look at your challenges. Again, Genesis 50:20, what the enemy has intended for evil, yeah, God can use for good. He can use it as an opportunity to bless you, to advance you, to help those that are around you, your spiritual family, your earthly family. And so I just want to end on that note. I pray that this blesses you. I pray that you share this video with others that need to hear this stuff. Um, this isn't so much a church, but it's a Bible study because we're studying the Bible. Um, there might be some that, give this neat stories and stuff like that, but I want to stick mainly to the Word because it is really needed at this point. And so, but I play again also that you watch some of the other Walk with Yah videos um, that are different than this one that talk about the various different spiritual concepts and stuff like that because people need to know what they're fighting. And so we're so far removed from the truth that we don't know the truth when it comes to us that we just a lot of us don't understand it. Oh, hold on. Does someone have a question? Did I push that lower hand? I don't think there's anyone on here but me. Oh, I raised my own hand. Okay, sorry about that. Pushed the wrong button. I zigged when I should have zagged. I bless you. We will do this again in 2 weeks. I look forward to that time. Shalom, and just know maybe your miracle could be next.